So the morning did not begin with us putting on our finest clothing and driving to the temple. Instead, your car sits in the driveway and you in comfortable clothes. You did not walk by our memorial wall and place a stone before the name of your loved ones. Instead, you gaze at pictures on your wall or in frames that rest on the mantle as a reminder of the people you care for so deeply. You did not find your typical seat with the customary people who join you. Instead, you sit in a more familiar seat with the most familiar people joining you. The prayer book you were using, it was not handed to you in the lobby, but was purchased new, or it was downloaded on Kindle, or opened as a flip book in a window of a different device. This is different for you and for me. But despite the differences, there are some things that do not change. The leaders of this service, me, Cantor Wolf, Ernie Green, I assure you that we miss you as much as you miss us. The service and its essentials are also the same. The melodies you have come to love, the spirit and resilience of our congregation, and the heart of the Jewish people, which has always been magnetically drawn to our traditions. And so, this morning, I ask for your patience and your understanding. Please know that the decisions I made about what would stay and what would go in our service were difficult decisions. No two people at our temple are exactly the same. We all have different preferences, and we all have different thresholds for how long we can remain in front of a screen. So this morning, you can expect a service that will last about an hour and 15 minutes. But please don't set your stopwatch, because as you can imagine, this is as new to me and as new to us as it is to you. Now, if you have not yet learned how to access our prayer book, it's not too late. I encourage you to visit our website for the various prayer book possibilities. You can expect my sermon to be broken up into parts and delivered over the course of the entire service. You can also expect me to announce at the appropriate times when we would be rising for a prayer. I choose to make this announcement even though I know that not all will be doing so, because I want this to be as authentic an experience as possible. Finally, following the morning service, the Torah service, including the reading of the binding of Isaac, with a video close-up of the Torah as it is read, along with a discussion, will be part of a separate Zoom service beginning at 11:30. So, let's begin this journey together. Page 110 in the Machzor, Ma Tovu.
Israel,
service, Rosh HaShanah, and all of our High Holy Day services this year are going to be done a little differently, in which I'm going to be giving a sermon in parts. So not all at once, but rather over the course of the entire service. So what I'd like you to do, though, for the moment, is reminisce with me. Reminisce with me back to the last day of December, New Year's Eve. Perhaps you're remembering the movie you watched, or you're thinking about the restaurant you went to, or the friends you were with, or even the struggle to find just the right thing to wear. Now, fast forward with me from that moment a few hours to the moment that the clock transitioned from 2019 to 2020. Do you remember your feeling? Excitement, joy. You kissed and celebrated 2020. You sang Auld Lang Syne, arm in arm with the people you loved. Talk about being sold a false bill of goods. The coronavirus may have been inevitable, but I certainly regret celebrating our entrance into 2020 with such enthusiasm. Now, I don't need to tell you that the last half year has been very hard. Every one of us has felt it in some way or another. You have felt it when you have wanted to meet a friend for a drink. You have felt it when you wanted to get a kiss from your grandchild. You have felt it when you have wanted to be with your sick parent in a nursing home or in a hospital. You have felt it when you've awoken in the middle of the night with anxiety. You have felt it when you saw bare shelves at the grocery store, and you have felt it when you have competed with the rest of your family for Wi-Fi bandwidth. Yes, we have all felt it in some way or another. But it's that sense of isolation that has perhaps been the most difficult for us, the loneliness, our desperate need for connection and community, which has been all but lost in the year 2020. And yet, can we deny how much we have grown and will continue to grow as a result of our struggle? You know, there was a famous sage of our tradition named Shimon Bar Yochai. He was a prized student of Rabbi Akiva who emerged during the dark time of Roman persecution after the destruction of the temple. And he is thought to be the author of the mystical work called the Zohar. Now, if you want to know where he found the time to write this extensive work of 23 volumes, let me explain. The Talmud tells a story that one day Bar Yochai and his colleagues were sitting in dialogue, reflecting on the building projects of the Roman Empire. You know, what have the Romans ever done for us? The bathhouses, the bridges, the marketplaces, everything. While one rabbi complimented the Romans and another rabbi sat silent, Bar Yochai criticized them, saying everything that the Romans made was of no societal good. It just served their own interests. Now, unbeknownst to the group, an informer sat in their midst who reported the conversation to the authorities. Not long after, a decree of death to Bar Yochai was decreed, so he fled with his son Eleazar to a cave in which they would live for 12 years, sustained by a miraculous carob tree and a stream of water at the entrance to the cave. Knowing that they would be in the cave for a long time, and only having the single garment of clothing that they were wearing, father and son decided that it would be best for each of them to dig a hole in the sand in the cave, and then to bury themselves up to their shoulders. This way they could preserve the only clothing they had by removing it for most of the day. So after 12 years of two bodiless heads staring at each other and talking about Torah and mysticism, the prophet Elijah found them in the cave and told them that the governor was dead and that there was no longer a decree issued for his death. So hopefully that answers the question of when or where he found the time to at least come up with the ideas for this book. But the story goes on. You see, brimming with piety from his monastic cave existence, Bar Yochai is shocked to discover life on the outside of the cave going on. Business as usual. How could they plow fields and harvest crops and tend to their daily lives? These are all such earthly pursuits. Were they not interested in deeper thoughts of Torah and God? And then, in an act which would more likely be seen in a comic book or a superhero movie, he gazes with such disgust at the outside world that everything upon which he cast his eyes would immediately burst into flames. And so a voice from heaven calls out to Bar Yochai and says, Bar Yochai, have you emerged from the cave only to destroy my world? Return to the cave. And return is what Bar Yochai did. For 1 more year, he and his son stayed in the cave. And when that time was completed, Bar Yochai emerged from the cave and became the leading sage of his time. More of this to come. Our service continues now with the Baruch Hu. On page 142, we rise. Yotzer in Hebrew, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Yotzer or uvorei choshech, osei shalom uvorei et hakol, or olam be'otzar chaim, orot me'ofel amar vayehi, ha'me'ir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. Ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, Kulam b'chokhma asita mal'a ha'aretz kinyanecha. Tiparach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al me'orei or sha'asita yefa'arucha sela. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir, v'nizkeh chulanu mehera le'oro, Baruch atah Adonai yotzer ha'me'orot. Page 150, Shema. Shema. Seated, page 152, V'ahavta.
V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom הלבבך ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם נאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Page 163.
Said Rabbi Eliezer Hammodai, "Consider the courage of Israel. When Moses said to the people in Egypt, 'Arise and go forth,' they did not ask, 'How can we go into the wilderness with no sustenance for the way?' They had faith and they went forward. The voice that lifts up the lowly, upholds the exhausted, and tells us to put one front foot in front of the other. Sometimes it comes from within."
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסיף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסיף אלה. שירה חדשה שבחו גאולים לשמך בשפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדי חינומך יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני גאל, גאל ישראל.
We rise for the tefillah beginning on page 166. It begins with Adonai Sifatai Tiftach.
Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, אחר, חסדי אבות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הקולת רב להושיע
We are seated. So I assume that the Talmud's account of Shimon Bar Yochai that I shared with you was eerily familiar. We may not have been cooped up in a cave with our family for 13 years, but for some, it has certainly felt like we have. Our houses worked well for us in the past, but creating 2 home offices in those houses, not to mention homeschooling our children, or the thought of occupying young children during every single waking hour of the day, or simply engaging with the same person and no other for all of this time. Suddenly, it is not so difficult to imagine ourselves like Bar Yochai. Just a carob tree and a stream of water to sustain Bar Yochai and his son. It reminds me of the story from the Torah when the Israelites complained to Moses about the fact that they missed eating quail while they were slaves in Egypt. So what does God do? They say they miss eating quail. He feeds them nothing but quail for an entire month until, as God said it became loathsome to them. Every meal for these Israelites, just quail for an entire month. It's kind of funny, actually, until you realize that over the past 6 months, we've been kind of doing the same. We've tried to mix it up from time to time, but in the end, we just have a handful of reliable recipes. He didn't leave that cave for 12 years. He never once stepped foot into the world for even a moment, fearing for his life. Just like you and just like me. Just the other day I was at Sam's Club and I was alarmed to see a woman walking around the store without a mask. What are you doing? I thought to myself. It's dangerous. What are you doing? But I was paralyzed into silence. I couldn't say anything. Or a few days ago, I was in Safeway and I heard this loud sneeze. Suddenly, I went into full hazmat mode. I thought that it would be prudent to bring myself to DEFCON 3. First, I ascertained the general direction of the sneeze, based, of course, on my memory. Then I surveyed the ventilation system and determined the best direction for me to turn my head. And finally, I tucked my face beneath my shirt and took slow and quick inhalations. And after a few moments, I authorized a removal of the DEFCON designation. You see, I am maybe a little bit more so than others, but I think we all are a little bit like Bar Yochai, to be sure, when we realize how dangerous it is to leave our houses. But what interests me most about this story is the part we can least identify with, but which is perhaps the most important part, the end of the story. When Bar Yochai and his son emerged from the cave, what happened? How did they function? The Talmud tells us that Bar Yochai was so disturbed by what he saw that he burned up everything his eyes beheld. And what did God say? God said, "Have you emerged from the cave only to destroy my world?" That could be us too. I think we all know it. In fact, I think we know it so well that we are afraid to even talk about it. As we slowly but surely make our ways out of the cave, how responsible are we going to be in doing so? Are we trying to go back to everything we knew and loved to do? No masks, crowded parties, throwing caution to the wind? If so, I think we all know what will happen. We will slowly but surely destroy our world and will be forced to go back into the cave. Our job is to realize the power we have to destroy our world and also the people we share it with. Our job is to control our capacity for destruction, even if it means making compromises we never thought we would. A little more later. Now on page 174 with Unatana Tokef. Let us proclaim the power of this day, a day whose holiness awakens deepest awe and inspires highest praise for your dominion. For your throne is a throne of love. Your reign is a reign of truth. In truth, you are judge and plaintiff, counselor and witness. You inscribe and seal. You record and recount. You remember all that we have forgotten. And when you open the book of memories, it speaks for itself. For every human hand leaves its mark, an imprint like no other. Page 176 now. And so a great shofar will cry Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels, in a whirl of fear and trembling, will say, "Behold, the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments." Page 178.
Rosh HaShanah יקטבון וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור יחטבון בראש השנה יקטבון וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור בראש השנה יקטבון וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור יחטבון בראש השנה יקטבון וביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור
Rosh HaShanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age and who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted? But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. Page 184, we rise. We can be seated, page 196. Our God and God of the generations before us, may a memory of us ascend and come before you. May it be heard and seen by you, winning your favor and reaching your awareness, together with the memory of our ancestors, the memory of your sacred city, Jerusalem, and the memory of your people, the family of Israel. May we be remembered for safety, well-being, and favor, for love and compassion, for life and for peace on this day of remembrance.
Zachreinu Adonai Eloheinu bo letova.
Amen.
Ulfagdenu livracha.
Eternal God, remember us, be mindful of us, and redeem us for a life of goodness and blessing.
Amen.
Amen. Page 214. Our God, divine presence, whose path our ancestors walked, bless us now with words first bestowed on Israel in the time of Moses and Aaron, the threefold blessing given us through Torah that joins our hopes with theirs. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may you know God's blessings of shelter and care. May it be so. May you receive the light of God's kindness and grace. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be so. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may you see God's favor and goodness, and may you partake of God's peace. May it be so. Before we continue with Sim Shalom, our song and prayer of peace, I'd like to share with you another prayer for peace. Makor HaShalom, source of peace, Masdar al-Salam. At the dawn of this new year, this year of such torment and challenge, we greet with open arms, open souls, and open minds the emerging reality of peace, shalom, salam, between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, with the fervent prayer and expectation that more Arab countries shall follow this path. We are grateful for the depth of vision and of optimism that invigorated this journey. In a time of such darkness, let peace be the Ner Tamid, the eternal light, that burns in the hearts of our people and of all peoples. Let us commit ourselves to being, in the words of the prophet, prisoners of hope, that there will be a time when the entire Middle East will be watered once again from the rivers that went forth from the Garden of Eden. Amen. I shared with you about Shimon Bar Yochai incinerating everything he gazed at out of disgust. But do you remember what it was that disgusted him so much? It was that the community was functioning business as usual. Now remember, they had not been in any danger, so no one else needed to hide. And yet, when Bar Yochai saw them, he couldn't believe that they cared about such earthly pursuits. Why were they not interested in deeper thoughts? But why should they be? They didn't have the same experience that Bar Yochai had. Why would they be changed? But us, we have had our own cave experience. We have had the ability to take stock of the things most important to us. Ask yourself, over the last 6 months, have you read more books than you had in the past? Have you reconnected with old friends by Zoom? Have you eaten regular meals together with your family? Have you reached out to people in need and offered assistance? Have you prioritized your parents or your spouse or your kids in ways you had not done before? Have you missed coming to the synagogue? Have you become more understanding and generous when a business or a person is unable to fully do what you once expected them to do? This is all the new you, the better you, the more patient you, the you that has always been inside of you. But of course, this new, great you is just you, no one else. That was one of Bar Yochai's biggest mistakes. He couldn't understand why everyone wasn't exactly like he was. This new life of his seemed so obvious to him. Why wasn't it obvious to everyone else? The simple fact is that they did not share his experiences. And for us, the same is true. As we emerge from COVID-19, and I don't know when that will be, is it fair to assume that everyone else will have read new books or reconnected with old friends? It's not. It's not fair. Some of us have barely managed, teetered on the edge of depression. Some of us have realized that the relationships we thought we had with our spouses or parents or children was apparently something we had simply made up in our own minds. We may all be growing and learning about ourselves, but we are not all learning the same lessons. Our task is now and will be over the months and years ahead of us as we scratch and crawl our way out of this dark time. Our task is to see people for who they are and where they are. We will definitely not have coped with COVID-19 all in the same way. And just in case you are consulting someone's Facebook posts to get an honest sense of how that person is doing, I implore you not to make any assumptions. Just think about the Torah portion we will read a little bit later today, the Akedah. Abraham and Isaac heading together from Mount Moriah to do the unthinkable. But the reality is that they approached this same event from two entirely different perspectives. Isaac, believe it or not, was proud. He saw himself as a gift for God. In fact, numerous commentators and poets have written about Isaac's disappointment that he wasn't able to do that which he thought he was made to do. Abraham, on the other hand, is a distraught father, stalling and fruitlessly negotiating. Isaac and Abraham experienced this trauma in two remarkably different ways. And this is because that is what life is. People experience trauma differently. People have different ways of doing things. Shimon Bar Yochai did not understand that lesson, but we can. Our service continues now with silent prayer. Please consider the meditation on your screen. 223, we continue with Avinu Malkeinu, we rise.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chumul aleinu. Ya'alol aleinu, metabeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kodeinu, Besefer Chaim Tovim. Avinu Malkeinu, Kodesh aleinu. Kodesh aleinu, Shana tova. Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Kodesh aleinu, Shana tova. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu, Shema Koleinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aneinu, ki ein banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'yoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'aneinu, ki ein banu ma'asim.
We are seated. One last thought about Shimon Bar Yochai and his cave. 12 years on cherubs and water. 12 years buried to his shoulders so he and his son could preserve their only garments. 12 years discussing Torah, which would serve as the core of our Jewish mystical tradition. 12 years of isolation. I wonder if he ever would have dreamed he was capable of it. Or would he have said that it was beyond his abilities? My friends, you are watching our Rosh Hashanah morning service on video right now. That, in its own right, is something you would never have imagined yourself doing. But like Shimon Bar Yochai, I am certain that the last 6 months have shown you the multitude of things that you are capable of that you never thought you ever could do. You are using the computer like never before and Instacarting and cleaning your house. You have probably fixed things you never realized you could, and you are sharing your emotions more than ever before, and you are resisting temptations you never thought was possible. You have been practically homeschooling your kids, and you have become a barber, and you've learned how to bake sourdough bread. And you are surviving. At this season we say, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva. Help us come back to you, O God, and we will come back to you. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Renew our days to be like they were before. Not exactly the same, because we have grown. We will never be the same. But renew those days for us so we can show off our best selves. Shana Tova. Page 279, we continue with the service of the sounding of the shofar. Misery for breakfast, morning coffee with the news of distant deaths, because someone's always suffering, and there's bound to be a crisis raging somewhere, or a quieter catastrophe barely at the threshold of our notice. We're accustomed to the feeling of something going wrong, like static in the background, tuned out so we can get on with our day. And it's just the same as yesterday, and nothing can be done, so there's not much point in getting too upset. But if something were to shock us, like a baby's piercing wail or a fire bell in the night, like a punch in the stomach or a puncture in the eardrum, like a savage call to conscience or a frantic cry for help, would we scream like a shofar and get mad enough to act? When a ram's horn is sounded in a city, do the people not take alarm?
Goodness of the world, Tuvo Shel Olam. Today we stand before the shofar, to hear in its voice the broken notes of our history, the unbroken quest from Moriah and Sinai to the end of days.
At Sinai, our people accepted their calling. On the third day, as morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning, a dense cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud blast of the horn. The sound of the shofar grew louder and louder. As Moses spoke, God answered in thunder.
Festive music and solemn declaration. The shofar gave voice to the spirit of Israel. Sound the shofar on our feast day, on the new moon, when it is hidden. For this is Israel's law, a decree of the God of Jacob.
It enlivened our worship with power and joy. Praise God with the shofar call. Praise God with harp and lyre.
Sounding the alarm in ancient days, it gathered our people for battle. The Spirit of God enveloped Gideon. He sounded the shofar, and the people rallied behind them.
The shofar called us to judgment and repentance. Sound a ram's horn in Zion, sanctify a fast. Proclaim a solemn assembly, gather the people. Turn back to me with all your heart, with fasting, weeping, and lamenting.
It proclaimed the coming of God's dominion. With trumpets and the sound of the horn, raise a shout before our sovereign God. For God will rule the earth justly, and its peoples with equity.
Page 206, we rise for the shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishma kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. תקיע שברים תרועה Tekiah, Tekiah, Shevarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah. Tekiah. Please be seated and we join for Areshet.
Shana Tova. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of Temple Beth Shalom, I wish you a year of blessings and of peace. We started Rosh HaShanah last night in a new and exciting way, and I hope that many of you enjoyed it. We thank Rabbi Goldstein for creating and leading the Seder. My thanks to the many people who made this morning's service possible. Rabbi Ari Goldstein, Cantor Yosei Wolf, Ernie Green, Lori Hayes, Noah Dion, a team of recording experts from Live Arts Maryland, and members of the Annapolis Chorale. Our office staff, Jill Sussman, Penny Croydon, Sandy Baresi, and Georgiana Gross, along with our school directors, Tracy Greenberg and Missy Levin. Each year at this time, our congregation collects food for our local food bank, My Brother's Pantry. Our High Holy Day drive is very important at this time, and especially so this year, because of the greater need for food by those affected by COVID-19. Please fill a grocery bag or two with unexpired, non-perishable items and bring your food donations to Temple. Check the High Holy Day page for hours when the truck is available and a list of needed food items. If you prefer, you may donate money instead of food by sending a check made out to My Brother's Pantry to Temple. This year, we will observe the ritual of Tashlik privately in order to keep proper distance. To each of you, my Temple Beth Shalom family, Lashana Tova.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל עמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
289. May the time not be distant, our God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when lies and bigotry shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. So may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your dominion be established on earth and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. Slightly off the page that you have before you, but with good reason. Today has many names. The most well-known of them all, of course, is Rosh HaShanah, the head of the year. It is also called Yom Teruah, the day of blasting the horn. For as we all well know, this day is announced with the unique sound of the shofar. But today also has two other names, names which are equally as descriptive and equally as elegant and significant, but less used. One is Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance, and the other is Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. While it is true that these names refer to our hope that we are remembered for a blessing in the coming year as God decrees judgment on us, I cannot help but think of these two names in a slightly different way on this specific Rosh Hashanah. As I am sure you all know by now, yesterday our nation and our Jewish community lost a luminary with the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was a tireless advocate of gender equality and civil rights. Though tiny in stature, she was a giant of action and conviction. On this day of remembrance and this day of judgment, the judge of all judges welcomes Judge Ginsburg to the supremest of courts. And we take comfort in knowing that she is most certainly advocating on our behalf. And so as we prepare for the Kaddish, our thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has taken from us, our hearts open as well to the wider circle of loss in our community and wherever grief touches the human family. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing in this new year and always. We're on page 292 and we rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechal beit Yisrael, ba'gala uv'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach li'alam ulamei al-maya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha berichu, le'ila mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiram bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, Hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to every bereaved heart. Amen. You may be seated, and we continue with our final closing song, A New Year, followed by one final benediction. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, our God and God of our ancestors. You may not have recognized us this year. We were not in the place that you usually find us. We didn't read some of the prayers you typically hear from us, O God. We didn't always rise when you expected us to be standing. We didn't sing along when we might normally have done so. Just because you might not have recognized us today, we were still here with you. We were still reaching out to you as we have done for thousands of years on this sacred day. Adonai oz le'amo yitain. O God, may you please grant us strength at this unusual time. Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. And O God, please, please bless us with peace. Amen. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.